In the near future, the use of biochemical weapons leads to a catastrophe that makes Earth's atmosphere unbreathable. The President of the United States reassures the public that citizens are his top concern, but reporters persist in asking about whispered rumors, claims of hidden underground bunkers where elite scientists are being taken for protection. Eventually, the tragedy claims the lives of most of humanity. As part of a last resort plan, the nation's most brilliant scientists are placed in cryogenic sleep within underground bunkers, waiting for the air to become safe again. There are multiple such bunkers scattered across the country, and each one is maintained by 2 engineers who wake up for a 2-hour maintenance window every 6 months. In one of these specific facilities, the 2 caretakers are Bauer and Cartwright. Bauer is always the first to awaken. He experiences a brief wave of nausea upon emerging from stasis, but recovers quickly. Cartwright, on the other hand, consistently suffers from nightmares due to his deep-rooted claustrophobia, which makes his awakening process much harder. Once both men are up and functioning, they begin their scheduled tasks. These include logging into the main system to confirm that their facility is operational. Though they can't communicate directly with other bunkers, the data shows that the others are still functioning. They also run air quality scans on the surface, but the results show that the air is still heavily toxic. While checking system data, Cartwright notices signs of recent seismic activity, which raises his concern about potential damage to the facility. While Bauer heads down a corridor to perform some repairs, Cartwright takes a moment to retrieve a hidden photo from behind the bulletin board. The moment is interrupted by the sound of a familiar voice, Abby, who is a hallucination representing the woman he loves. He often talks to her when he's alone. After placing the photo in his pocket, Cartwright heads to the cryo chamber to check on the sleepers. Abby reappears beside her sleeping pod, revealing that she's one of the scientists in stasis. She urges Cartwright to finally tell Bauer about her existence, but he insists he's waiting for the right moment. With their duties complete, the 2 engineers spend their remaining time watching old TV shows, playing chess, and relaxing. Abby appears again to Cartwright, gently telling him that she looks forward to seeing him once he returns to cryosleep, but Cartwright dreads going back into his pod. No matter how many times he's done it, the confinement always triggers intense claustrophobia. As Abby tries to calm him, her image suddenly appears to be on fire. Cartwright panics and realizes his cryo chamber is actually on fire. He runs to alert Bauer, who emerges from the bathroom with a fire extinguisher and manages to put out the flames, but the pod is completely destroyed and Bauer injures his hand in the process. To make matters worse, their 2-hour window ends at that exact moment. The facility's power shuts down and the air filtration system goes offline. With only flashlights and the remaining oxygen in the room, they turn to the manual and discover there's an emergency override system. They manage to activate the backup air valve and return to the control room, now waiting for breathable air to circulate back in. During the tense wait, they open up to each other. Bauer reveals that he had a wife and 3 daughters. In order to take this job, he was promised that his family would be brought in after him. But he watched helplessly as the government sealed him inside the bunker, leaving his family outside with empty promises of safety. Finally, the power comes back on and the oxygen begins to flow again, giving them another 2 hours. They quickly search the storeroom for a spare cryopod, but there's none to be found, despite the manual's claims. Cartwright suspects this may not be the only storage area. He checks the facility's blueprint, filled with confusing codes, and finds mention of a long-term storage section that's usually ignored because it's sealed off. Convinced the spare pod must be there, they remove the seal and step into an unfamiliar corridor. There, Cartwright spots a broken surveillance camera, something that shouldn't exist there, since this part of the building isn't supposed to be wired to the main system. Bauer suggests it might be leftover equipment from when the facility was a military base. Deeper inside, Cartwright sees Abby again, and she leads him to a box where he finally discovers a replacement pod. The 2 engineers quickly get to work repairing Cartwright's tank, but when the time comes to use it, Cartwright still hesitates, paralyzed by fear. Bauer offers to test it first, but as he lies down, he immediately notices the air inside is too thin. Cartwright rushes to check the air pump, but before he can react, the pod malfunctions and seals itself shut, suffocating Bauer inside. Just as he is on the brink of losing consciousness, Cartwright finally returns with a knife and slices open the pod to free him. Bauer believes Cartwright tried to kill him and shoves him away, but Cartwright explains he had trouble finding a tool to break the pod open. He also reminds Bauer that the pod was meant for him, not Bauer, which makes Bauer realize it was an accident. With Cartwright's cryopod destroyed, Bauer proposes to sacrifice one of the sleeping scientists and use their pod instead. Cartwright is horrified at the idea, reminding Bauer that their entire mission is to protect these people. But Bauer reminds him that they won't be able to protect anyone if they're dead. Reluctantly, Cartwright begins preparing a morphine injection for a painless euthanasia. As he gets ready, Abby appears again and pleads with him not to go through with it. Cartwright suddenly stops and says he can't kill anyone. Bauer is enraged, accusing him of prioritizing sentiment over survival. He strikes Cartwright in anger, but Cartwright fights back and threatens him with the syringe, asking Bauer to trust that he has another idea. Back in their workspace, Cartwright examines the blueprints and, thanks to Abby's clue, notices something he had overlooked before. The strange codes labeled on the diagrams match the designations in the computer system. Each code corresponds to a different bunker facility. Cartwright believes these bunkers might still have functional equipment. Bauer is hesitant, worried about possible air leaks and contamination between the connected structures. But Cartwright is ready to take the risk. He suits up in a hazmat outfit equipped with an oxygen supply and a radio to stay in contact with Bauer, who will guide him remotely via security cameras. As Cartwright steps into the tunnel, he stumbles upon a skeleton on the ground, clearly a soldier, judging by the uniform and weapon. With only 30 minutes of oxygen remaining, Bauer works to repair old security monitors while Cartwright ventures deeper into the dark, dust-filled tunnels. Blue particulates drift through the air, remnants of the atmospheric contamination. Eventually, Cartwright appears on the reactivated monitors, allowing Bauer to track and label his movements. Soon, Cartwright reaches a door, but inside, everything is in disrepair. The systems are dead, the place is silent, and no survivors are in sight. Cartwright starts to lose hope, but Abby reappears, urging him not to give up. Just then, Bauer suggests Cartwright might be able to access the inner facility through the air ducts. The idea terrifies Cartwright, whose claustrophobia flares up immediately. But with no other options, he forces himself into the cramped vent. Meanwhile, Bauer suddenly loses radio contact. Trying to re-establish communication, Bauer accidentally rechecks old surveillance footage and is devastated to find a clip showing Cartwright doing nothing while Bauer was suffocating in the malfunctioning pod. Meanwhile, Cartwright emerges into the facility and reconnects with Bauer over the radio. He surveys the area and is heartbroken to find it completely destroyed. A gaping hole in the ceiling allows him to glimpse the world outside, revealing a shattered planet ravaged by nuclear war. The atmosphere had been poisoned long ago. When he checks the sleeper chambers, Cartwright finds them ruined too. The realization hits him hard as the computer back at his own facility had been feeding them false data to keep them sane, making them believe other bunkers were still active. Then he realizes his oxygen is almost gone and sprints back toward his bunker. Once he reaches the final corridor, he begins the decontamination process. But on the other side of the sealed door, Bauer is waiting, knife in hand. He confronts Cartwright about the apparent lie and accuses him of being a threat to both himself and the sleepers. Cartwright desperately tries to explain, but Bauer cuts him off, revealing he also took the gun from the dead soldier's body. Cartwright turns and flees back into the ruined bunker. His air is nearly gone, and each step becomes a struggle. Abby appears again, telling him to use the duct system. There's another path that can take him back. Crawling once more through the tight vent, Cartwright hears Bauer on the radio, his voice full of pain and betrayal. Eventually, Cartwright finds a way back into the main facility and rips off the suit to breathe freely again. But as he tries to make it back to the office, Bauer ambushes him in the darkness and opens fire. The shot misses and Cartwright scrambles to hide. Bauer chases him, ignoring Cartwright's pleas and attempts at reasoning. Using Cartwright's radio signal as a locator, Bauer stalks him through the corridors, but Cartwright outsmarts him, leaving behind both his radio and flashlight to mislead him. With Bauer chasing a decoy, Cartwright doubles back and locks the office door. He rushes to the infirmary to retrieve morphine, unsure whether he can bring himself to kill a man who once felt like family. Abby urges him to act because if he doesn't, Bauer will kill him first, and they'll lose their future together. Cartwright returns to confront Bauer, only to find he has already forced his way inside. Cartwright tries to be cautious, but Bauer shots him in the shoulder. As Bauer approaches, deeply wounded by the betrayal, Cartwright tries to explain. He hands Bauer the secret photograph he had hidden. He then begins talking to her, and Bauer becomes enraged, thinking Cartwright has lost his mind. Cartwright takes advantage of the distraction to lunge and disarm him, but he fails to knock Bauer out and flees to the cryo chamber. Bauer picks up the fallen photo and recognizes the woman in it. Enraged, Bauer rushes to the sleeping pods and threatens to kill Abby if Cartwright doesn't come out. But Cartwright sneaks up behind him and injects him with the morphine. Bauer fights to stay conscious and tries to shoot Cartwright, but the drug overtakes him. Cartwright tries to help him, but Bauer urges him to go. There's not much time left, and he needs to get back into cryosleep to protect Abby. With no time to spare, Cartwright hurries back to the cryo chamber and climbs into Bauer's pod. The countdown reaches 0 just as he seals himself in. As his consciousness fades, he imagines Bauer sitting calmly, playing chess like old times. Years later, the cryogenic systems finally shut down. The sleepers awaken at last, slowly rising to see the changed world. Abby searches among them and finds Cartwright, now aged and frail. Without hesitation, she throws her arms around him,